You can actually make out some lovely ghazals being played at my house. We were actually planning to do a tea party. So we have the mood set, we have the music, and we have the right set of people here to talk about the tea as well. So we are live now, and I think it's 8:04 as promised. Yeah. Great. It's 8:05, sir. Mr.
Yeah, I
Patra,
can begin. Yes.
yeah, Mr. Patra would request you to be also online now.
Mr. My batchmate, Dinkar Srivastava IFS
Yes.
will also come in.
Yeah,
He's
he has not
included in the
joined in.
panel.
Yeah, he is not joined in as of now, but I'm keeping a tab. As soon as he comes in, I will take him in. Fantastic. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is such a lovely, beautiful evening today. At least here in Delhi, it's decently cold. And I can actually make out just by talking about the tea that this is going to be definitely one hot piping session for us. And who else can understand the need of it? You can make out by my clothes, the kind of packaging that I've done for myself. Uh, it's truly a privilege to welcome Sri Narendranath Dharmaraj, who's been a connoisseur and icon of tea in the country. And alongside, we have Mr. Sujit Patra, who's Secretary of the Tea Board, um, hosting them for the All That's Kerala, which is our 11th session today. We have Mr. MP Joseph, our honorable host for the session, and who has taken us in this journey of telling what Kerala is all about. And I keep admitting it always, as part of City Book Leaders, our job is how can we make and bring books in everything. And that's how we are thinking, how can we make these digital sessions that we have hosted for the last so many months into a format of a book. And very soon, rather than a coffee table book, I must say we should try for a tea table book, because today is the session for tea.
Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Joseph just added and picked up his tea. I shall also get my mug. But I leave you all three gentlemen to your company now. It would be a pleasure to listen to this entire conversation. Welcome everyone for joining us.
Thank you, Mohit. Thank you for the introductions. Thank you for being the conceptualizer of this program, and also its organizer. Let me thank everyone who is coming today to All That's Kerala chat along the backwaters. As Mohit said, this is the 11th episode of our series, and it is the City Book Leaders which Mohit represents, and the Kerala Museum, Medapalli, Cochin, Kerala, which co-organizes this program. We have designed this as a program that introduces Kerala to the country and to the world, and of course to Kerala itself. Many thanks, Mohit, once again, and to City Book Leaders and to Aditi of the Kerala Museum. I believe she's not here yet, for all the organizing and the backstopping work that you're doing behind closed doors. Thank you so much. Today's episode is on the cup that cheers, tea. Especially on cold, wintry evenings, tea is what keeps us warm and cozy and gives us that extra cheer. I'm personally a tea lover. I used to, at a point of time, drink 20, 24, 25 cups of tea a day, especially when I was at work in the bureaucracy, in the Indian bureaucracy, and later in the UN bureaucracy. But of course, gradually I've cut it down. But even now, I drink, I think, 8 or 9 cups or 10 cups of tea a day, and quite large cups, quite large glasses. I always believe that our Indian tea should be drunk in a glass, not in a cup. Kerala produces an abundance of tea. And the tea that we produce here may not be of the best quality, not like, say, Darjeeling tea, but I understand the quantity of tea that's grown is quite big. Now, to my mind, tea brings in two economic advantages to Kerala. One is the income that, of course, the sale of tea brings in to the state, which is huge, and of course, connected with the foreign exchange that we get when we export the tea. The second, and I'm told that even in times of COVID, the orthodox variety of leaf tea from Kerala has become a hit in the Commonwealth of Independent States, CIS countries, including Russia, and that China purchases tea from us and then exports it to Iran and other countries. But I think you should know better. The second reason, what is there for? One economic reason is the amount of the wealth it produces in terms of sale of tea. The second, I think, important aspect of tea for Kerala is something related. What makes Kerala beautiful are its mountains. They bring the tourists in. More than the beaches, there are beaches all across the world, but the type of mountains that we have in Kerala is unique. So it is the mountains that attract a lot of tourists into the state. And what makes Kerala's mountains so unique and distinctly beautiful? If you ask me, the answer is the manicured tea gardens of our states on the verdant slopes of Munnar. It's actually beautiful to see them. So on the one hand, it is the sale of tea. On the other hand, it is the tourists that the tea and the tea gardens bring into the state. So there are two reasons why tea is important to us. And today, to understand the tea industry in Kerala, we have with us Sri Narendranath Dharmaraj. He will tell us all about tea and about the tea industry. He is, if I may call it that, the tea man of the South. He has spent an entire lifetime in the growing and the making of tea. As Sujit Patra, who is with us. Sujit Patra is the secretary of the Indian Tea Association. He's joining us from Calcutta. He's joined us from Calcutta. He tells us Mr. Dharmaraj is the doyen of the South Indian tea industry. Until recently, he was the chief executive officer and the whole-time director of Harrison Malayalam Limited. He was earlier chairman of the very, very powerful, and I should know it, because as Labour Commissioner Kerala, I had to take some tough beatings from it. He's the chairman of the Association of Planters of Kerala, that powerful body that represents the plantation industry in Kerala. And they include not only Harrison Malayalam, but tea estates like Kannandev and also rubber planters and coffee planters. It's a very powerful body. He was chairman of that. He was also president of the United Planters Association of South India, UPASI, which is the South Indian body, of which the APK Kerala Association of Planters of Kerala is a part. Mr. Dharmaraj was the president of the UPASI, the United Planters Association of South India. Dharmaraj has spent a lifetime, that's over 45 years, in the plantation industry and in the agri-business. So he should know everything that there is to know about the tea industry in Kerala. And I would encourage our listeners, our viewers, to ask him questions. All that you wanted to know about tea and did not know whom to ask, you can ask Mr. Dharmaraj during the course of the next 50 minutes or so. Mr. Dharmaraj has also been vice president of the tea division of Harrison Malayalam. He was manager of the tea division of Unilever at Cambridge, England for about 3 years. He has traveled extensively across the tea world, both tea producing countries and tea consuming countries. Thank you for being with us tonight, Mr. Dharmaraj. Welcome to All That's Kerala, a chat along the backwaters. I should also once again welcome Mr. Sujit Patra, who joined us at very short notice, half an hour's notice to be exact. He is the secretary of the Indian Tea Association. He's based in Calcutta. He knows all that there is to know about the tea industry in the country as a whole, the exports, the production, the costs, the incomes, and so on. So thank you, both of you. I believe my own batchmate from the Indian Foreign Service, Mr. Dinkar Srivastava, will also be joining us. Mr. Dinkar Srivastava was India's ambassador in Iran, in Libya, and in the Czech Republic. Earlier, he was the first secretary in Amman, in Jordan. And he has been promoting Indian tea whenever he was posted in these countries. So he should also be joining us shortly. Thank you all very much. Welcome all of you to the program, the 11th episode of All That's Kerala, Chat Along the Backwaters. Let me start off with asking Mr. Dharmaraj my first question. It's more.
By the way, sir, we have Mr. Dinkar here with us now.
Welcome, Mr. Dinkar Srivastava. Thank you for being here. Mr. Dinkar is was India's ambassador in Iran, in the Czech Republic, and in Libya, and India's first secretary in Amman, capital of Jordan. Welcome, and he knows a lot about tea industry because he has been promoting tea in all these postings of his. Welcome, Dinkar. Thank you so much for being here. Pleasure to see you. Let me start out by asking my first question to Mr. Dharmaraj. Tea actually dates back to China. Uh, it's about 5,000 years old. I believe it was in 2732 BC that the Emperor Shenung discovered tea. When tea leaves from a wild tea bush uh, blew across because of the winds and fell into a pot of boiling water, and he later tasted the water, and it was the aroma and the smell and the taste was something that he loved very much. He loved the scent as well of the resulting brew. That was 5,000 years ago. But when Mr. Dharmaraj did tea come to Kerala? When was the first tea plantation laid out here? When was the first tea produced here on an industry scale here in Kerala, Mr. Dharmaraj? Dharmaraj, you'll have to, you may be muted. You'll have to open your muted.
No, I'm all right. Yeah.
Yeah, now you're better. Yeah, I can hear you. Thank you. Welcome.
Am I on? Am I on? Am I seen?
You're on, you're audible, you're visible.
Oh. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Joseph, sir. It's a privilege to have the occasion to interact with someone of your background and caliber. Therefore, I'm very delighted to say the least. I'm also happy that your colleague in the IFS, Mr. Srivastava, who was, among other things, Indian ambassador to Iran, a key exporting country from Indian tea standpoint. I'm happy to have him here. Equally a privilege to share this forum with him. And of course, my friend in the industry over many decades, Sujit Patra. Happy to have you here, Sujit. And thank you, Mohit, for organizing this excellent session, which I know is the 11th in the series of activities and subjects surrounding Kerala. So Joseph did mention a couple of points which makes tea in Kerala unique. And of course, he mentioned the revenue earning capability. I think the turnover of the Kerala tea is about 7,000 crores. And of course, he also mentioned about the biodiversity part of the tea growing areas. And of course, I would add a third dimension, and equally important dimension is the employment generation of this industry. It's a huge employment provider. Although lately the number of people working in tea plantations have come down. We'll talk about that a little later. But these three things, yes, make it rather unique proposition for Kerala. The first tea in Kerala was planted, I believe, in 1873 in Pyramid, in an estate called Penshurst, which is currently owned by a friend of mine called J.K. Thomas. I think this was probably the earliest tea planted anywhere in South India. What is unique about this industry? When I talk about the history of this industry, is that it is 250 years old. This industry in Kerala, you know, in a business world where you see industrial giants falling by the wayside because of disruptive technology, here is an industry which has withstood the test of time. So you can be critical about it and say that nothing has changed about it, but I would be complimentary to this industry and would want to say that obviously there's something very robust about this model and robust about this industry that has helped it maintain a long span of 250 years. I think, to my mind, there are two factors which is contributing to this. One, as I said earlier on, the huge employment capability of this industry, which sort of sustains a large rural community and population. The second is it's with all the research going on, it has not been possible to find an alternative, an in vitro alternative to tea. Tea remains the second most consumed beverage after water in the world. So we have not been able to synthesize tea in a lab, and still dependent on the plant Camellia sinensis for producing tea, and I think that's the other factor.
That's very interesting, Mr. Dharmaraj, to know that tea is the second most drunk drink in the world, in the sense that after water, it is tea
Yes.
that is drunk. Let me just quickly move on to Sujit and ask him about the tea industry on a national scale. Mr. Sujit Patra, what is the extent of tea that's grown in the country? How much of it is exported? What is the amount of money it brings to us in terms of foreign exchange and so on?
Yeah. Good evening, sir. Good evening to everybody. You see, so far as Indian tea is concerned, India is the largest black tea producer in the world. And if we consider green tea also, we are the second largest after China in the world so far as tea production is concerned. But our exports, as per in the ranking, we comes in the 4th position. First is Kenya, thereafter Sri Lanka, then China, and thereafter India. India's domestic consumption is huge. We have to cater to the domestic demands, which is around 1100 million kgs of tea. Okay, we have big population, but the issue is that our per head consumption is not as high as other countries, even our neighboring country Pakistan. Our per head consumption is around 786 grams per annum per head. So that is the scenario, macro scenario. We produce around 1,390 million kgs, out of which 10% is orthodox and green tea. So in India, consumption is mainly cities. So we, when we aim for exports, we make orthodox tea, whose consumption in India is very negligible. So
what
we requested tea board.
If I may interrupt, Mr. Patra,
Orthodox.
What is orthodox tea? Many of your viewers,
Sure.
even I wouldn't know it. And how is it different from unorthodox?
Sir, what happens? Absolutely. In fact, Mr. Dharmaraj is the right person to answer this. Anyway,
Okay.
There are two types of tea. First is black, and another one is green tea. That everybody knows. Now, in the CTC category, there are in the black tea category, there are CTC and orthodox. CTC is curd, tear, and curds. Means when a tea bush, from the tea bush tea leaves come, it is crushed under machine and thereafter oxidized and make that danadar or dust tea, whatever is available, we see from in the market. But in case of orthodox, it's a rolling type of machine which makes leafy type of tea. Okay, and there is oxidization process is also very little, and it gives you good flavor. And the productivity of orthodox tea is lower than that of CTC teas. So it is little more pricey. And in the world market, orthodox tea share is around 40%. CTC share is again 40%, and green tea is 20%. So, but here in India, we make only 10%, around 130 million kgs of orthodox tea. So if we make more orthodox tea, then the exportability of Indian tea becomes more. And we requested the government of India and tea board, and thereafter they are giving us little subsidy. You see what happens when we make orthodox tea, the productivity is very less because it's an art to make orthodox tea. CTC anybody can make, but orthodox you have to have expertise to make that orthodox tea. And for that, if we make orthodox, we don't have market in the domestic arena. So if it is not exported, it is a very risky, business. So, but there is demand for orthodox tea in the world market. As I have told, 40% of the share is in orthodox. So we are increasing year after year. Sorry.
Thank you so much. I think that's a great explanation, and I think I understood for the first time what orthodox tea and CTC, curd, tear, and I forgot the third, CTC tea is. Let me ask Dharmaraj, Mr. Dharmaraj, in Kerala, do we make more of CTC or more of orthodox? and why, I believe it's more of CTC, and why we are not focusing on orthodox tea here. I'll come back to you, Mr. Sujit.
Sure.
Yeah, as Sujit said, we also make a relatively smaller percentage of orthodox tea, maybe a little more than what Assam makes. I would say it's around 20% of our total production will be orthodox tea. As you mentioned, as the name indicates, orthodox was the way it was originally made when tea manufacture started. But with the emphasis on a more number of cups per unit kilogram of tea or unit weight of tea, that is how the CTC, the cut, tear, and curl that Sujit mentioned, came into being. And that the CTC eventually gave rise to the concept of tea bags, because faster infusion became the need of the consumer. So there was greater appeal and popularity for the CTC tea globally, and definitely from a domestic consumption point of view. And therefore, orthodox tea took a bit of a backseat. It is also less productive, as Sujit is saying, because you need a finer quality of leaf, which brings down your crop production, and your recovery of the made tea from green leaf in orthodox tends to be much lower than that in CTC. So because of the higher cost involved.
Do I understand, Mr. Dharmaraj, that orthodox tea are the leaf tea, like Darjeeling tea, the more expensive tea? That's orthodox.
Yeah, the leaf is typically a leafy tea, but it is its liquor has a greater flavor and aroma, etc.
But in Kerala and the rest of India, we prefer the CTC because it's stronger. You get that.
It is stronger. It is faster brewing. It is also to do with the way tea is brewed. I mean, as you would have seen in the hotels and tea shops, use this cloth sieve in a samovar. As they call the 1 yard tea.
Yes.
What you do normally there is you don't add tea each time you make more tea. You actually take the life out of the tea in a manner of speaking. So any tea that stands repeated brewing is a good tea, because they get what they call more cuppage, which means the hotels and tea shop gets more number of cups from a kilogram of tea, which is of course value for money for them.
So that is CTC, isn't it?
Yes. That's right.
Yeah. Now, both CTC and the orthodox tea, I believe, start off as 2 leaves and a bud, and they are picked in the morning from the tea bushes. They're collected and they're brought to the factory. Now, when are they plucked? I believe they're plucked in the morning. How old are these tea bushes? The tea bushes are pruned from time to time, so some of them can be very old, I believe. And do they get replanted like rubber gets replanted every, 30, 40 years? Do tea bushes get replanted?
When we get into the subject of tea manufacturing, I must mention up front that tea is a very natural product. I mean, it's a very few products where there is no additives, external additives whatsoever. It is internally synthesized by the biochemistry of the tea leaf, and therefore it's as natural a food or beverage product as it can get. Tea is essentially a tree. If you don't prune it, like you said, it will become a tree. It is pruned at a certain height to enable harvesting from ergonomics point of view. And the height at which it is pruned and how often it is pruned has a bearing on the rate of growth and the elevation in which tea is grown. Because higher the elevation, slower the growth, lower the elevation, faster the growth. So in a lower elevation, you might prune once in 3 years. Assam, Sujit will tell you, prunes every 2 years. In places like Munnar, you only prune every 5 years or 6 years because the growth is slow. And then they are harvested at a certain interval, depending on again the rate of growth of the year, and in the sort of months of April, May, and October, November, which are the peak growing seasons, coinciding with warm weather and rainfall. It is harvested more frequently, and in the colder weather and in the height of monsoons, it is harvested less often. And two-leaf in a bud is a bit of a misnomer in the sense because the weight of the tea leaf increases geometrically. You know, a one-leaf in a bud, if it is 2 grams, a two-leaf in a bud is 4 grams, and a three-leaf in a bud is 8 grams. So, you know, in terms of economics, you want to balance quality and quantity. And therefore, typically in a large corporate plantation, one would target a 3-leaf in a bud, which gives a good balance between the quality and the quantity. Of course,
leaves.
3-leaf in a bud, yes.
Not 2 leaves in the bud.
Not 2-leaf. 2-leaf is, you can do 2-leaf in a bud, which will give us a better quality, no doubt, but there will be a huge drop in the volume of crop production. So from an economic point of view, unless that value fully compensates for your increased cost, it may not be a great idea. So that's entirely a choice up to the producer, depending on what price he's getting for his teas. But largely, from a Kerala perspective, what we target is a 3-leaf in the bud. And of course, the next process is it is taken to the factory for what is called a process of withering. There is something called physical withering and something called chemical withering. Physical withering is the removal of moisture from typically the tea leaf coming from the fields will have a moisture percentage of about 75%. You need to bring it down to about 55% before it is subjected to further treatment.
Yes. Let me ask a question. Maybe Sujit would be the right person to answer this. Sujit Patra, what is the difference is there a difference in the way tea is grown in Kerala and say in Assam or in Darjeeling? Is there a difference in the way it is grown? Why is the quality different between the tea that's grown here in Kerala and the one that's grown say in Darjeeling? Darjeeling tea is world famous. Kerala tea is not so famous, I believe.
You see, quality depends on a lot of parameters, a lot of attributes are there. One is environment, another one is soil, then the plant seed, where from what kind of jat it has got, and thereafter plying management, as Mr. Dharmaraj has told that 2 leaves and buds, many times because of economic reason, because of productivity, there are 3 leaves, 4 leaves and a bud. Fine. And also plucking rounds. In some bushes, because of quality, they pluck after 7 days, after 10 days. In some cases, it is plucked after 15 days also. So all these and the manure management, pesticide chemicals management, all these things, and in the factory also, how it is manufactured. So all these things contribute to the quality and quantity of tea. So in Assam, yes, all over India, all over the world, this is the basic procedure. And thereafter, depending on the management principles, environment, economic considerations, they are, manufacturing tea.
Thank you. Let me go back to Mr. Dharmaraj. Mr. Dharmaraj, we've heard of Darjeeling tea. That's my personal favorite. We hear of Nilgiri's tea. We hear of Assam tea. We hear of Sri Lankan tea, but we don't hear of a Kerala tea. Munnar does not have a brand of its own, isn't it? We have Kannandevan tea, we have Tata tea, we have Finlay's tea, but there's no Kerala tea, there's no Munnar tea, is there? Why is that? So how come we don't have a brand name in Kerala for tea?
Well, as Sajid mentioned, the quality in tea is dependent on soil and agroclimatic conditions, rainfall, temperatures, etc., which largely impacts the quality of tea. Darjeeling has a what they call a muscatel flavor. Nilgiris has an aroma of its own. Within Kerala, Munnar region has a high flavor. Travancore, which is Pyramid, Vandiperiyar, are known for its strength. Wayanad is known for its blackness of the leaf appearance. Ultimately, it's all a matter of consumer preferences. You know, we talked about CTC and Orthodox. We have a major issue within my household itself. I like orthodox tea with its flavor and aroma. My wife drinks only CTC tea. So we lived with such differences over 42 years. That's a different matter, of course. But it's ultimately driven by consumer preference and ultimately driven by the economics of the business. For your information, although Darjeeling rightly is called the champagne of teas, Darjeeling tea industry, as Sajid will vouch for it, is in absolute doldrums, despite the big price they get, because their crop production is extremely low and the productivity of labor is extremely low. So while you may denigrate Kerala tea for not being in the league of Sri Lanka and Darjeeling, etc., I would want to state that nor can Darjeeling or Sri Lanka or any other country match the yield levels of Kerala, for instance, Munnar or Wayanad or any other region.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that bit of information,
Yes.
Mr. Dharmaraj. Like you, I am. We have got differences in our household. I drink Darjeeling tea, Lipton Green Label. My wife drinks the CTC. The preferences are different. But moving on, we spoke of 2 leaves, 3 leaves, 4 leaves, and a bud. Now, 2 Leaves and a Bud is a famous novel by Mulk Raj Anand, if I remember, set amidst the tea pickers of Assam. It's a peep into the very difficult life that the workers in the tea plantations in the tea estates live. Conditions in Kerala are not much better. I was Labour Commissioner Kerala for 5 years, and I believe that whereas the workers in Kerala, every other section get a very good wage, sometimes almost on a much higher than the national wage rate. The tea laborers still are a very impoverished lot. The tea laborers are, I think, the poorest paid workers in the state. They live in bad conditions, which is 50 or 100 years, conditions have 50 and 100 years old. Their labor liams are quite a shocking sight. Most of them have not been renovated for a long time. So whereas the rest of Kerala has made very rapid strides in wage rates and labor conditions, how come the tea industry, it's such a strong industry, such a powerful industry, why has it lagged so behind in terms of how the workers are, the emoluments and wages to the workers? When I say that, I've also got a question from Thambi Nagarjuna, who is, I believe, a trade union leader. He is sent in some questions almost on the same lines. He says that actually that the domestic market consumers are paying more than export clients, etc. And he also mentions that the first tea industry started in Munro's Island, leased from the land of Punyar's king, Manu Vikraman king. And slaves were brought from Africa to work in the plantations. Initially, there were no Keralites who were included as workers. But my question goes back to the condition of the workers in the tea estates. They continue to be much lower than the rest of the workers in the state. What is your reaction to that?
That's me, Mr. Joseph.
Sorry?
That's a question to me?
Yes, of course, yes.
I as a erstwhile Labour Commissioner, I'm sure you're very conversant with the Plantation Labor Act. So I have a little emotional attachment to the Plantation Labor Act because it was my grandfather who was a freedom fighter and a congressman in the 1940s. He saw the pitiable plight of the plantations of Harrison Crossfield those days in Wayanad. And he brought a parliamentary commission to study the conditions of workers. And I believe, I'm told, which he has told me before his death himself, he never knew that I was going to manage the plantations decades later, of course. He said that the Plantation Labor Act was enacted in 1948 basically to protect the interests of the workers, because they were essentially people who had been gathered from the plains to work in the tea plantations. Today, I would sort of beg to disagree with some of your inferences, sir, because there is a strong enactment governing these wages are agreed upon in a tripartite forum. Today, the tea wages in Kerala, cash wage is about 400 rupees, and if you add the wage-related costs such as provident fund, leave with wages, holiday pay, statutory minimum bonus, it will come to about 600 rupees a day. You could argue that it is not comparable with the industrial workers' wage, but then, given the cost of living in the rural areas, plus the fact that the other social and welfare cover are provided as envisaged by the Plantation Labor Act, like housing, potable water, prenatal and postnatal care, preschool, child care, etc., are provided. So it's not such a bad deal on the whole as it has been made out to be. Having said that, I do feel that this will continue to remain in focus and continue to rise on an aspirational basis because of the fact that these workers are now today, thanks to our present day communication, exposed to a world where aspirations are going up everywhere. The problem with this industry is this is a unique industry in as much as that 65% of its cost is on wage and wage-related cost. Therefore, any increase in wages directly impinge on the margin of this industry. That is why there is always a little tussle between the management and the trade unions when it comes to wage revision, which, as you know, happens once every 3 years. As for housing, again, there is something called the Plantation Labor Housing Advisory Board, which stipulates some minimum plinth area for the quarters, and they're provided with attached toilets, etc. But I do agree that these lines somehow gives an outmoded kind of concept. It is something which somehow relates to a colonial kind of background. Although you can argue that even an apartment is a line, a more upmarket line. But something about the lines that is rather backward in terms of its presentation. Therefore, I do believe that there is a case for revisiting that as we go along, which
I think there is a need to. Let me ask Sujit Patra about the national scene. How is the labor situation in Assam and West Bengal? The conditions of the labor must be worse than those in Kerala, isn't it? What is your response to it?
No, sir. No, sir. It is, in fact, totally misconception. Long time back, in this decade, there was a study commissioned by Tea Board to Accenture. And Accenture did this study where it was found that Indian tea's cost of production is the highest in the world. Why? Because they have, at the micro level, they have analyzed, as Mr. Dharmaraj has said, out of our total cost, 65% is only labor oriented. The rest is your other input cost. Now, why 65%? Because the industry is, first of all, governed by Plantation Labor Act, Factories Act, all sorts of acts. So we cannot avoid any benefit to the workers. Now, what happens? We apart from the cash wage, there are other benefits given to the industry all over the India. I mean, in Assam, in Bengal, in Kerala, Tamil Nadu, everywhere. Free housing, free medical, not only to the worker but to their dependents. And in any family, there are 4 or 5 dependents. So free housing, free medical, free education to the children, free your tea, free, all sorts of things are there. So all these social welfare benefits has some cost. That makes Indian tea the highest cost in the Indian tea, any industry. So now another thing is happened. You see, whatever we give government, many of these things which are put in kinds, that is not calculated in the wages. Okay. And several times various governments, including the central government, has formed various committees. They have found that some sorts of benefits which are given, that is unique to the tea industry. No other industry in this country provide those kind of benefits to their workers, which tea industry provide. So all this makes Now, what happens? Whatever cash wages are given, these are tea gardens are in remote areas. There is nothing except that working hours. There is nothing to do for the workers. So what they do, they socialize. That is the maximum. They go for drinking to the extent possible. So they could not reserve their their money. Situation has changed nowadays, but what happens, management also, all these costs, inputs has some cost. Okay, so management has to bear that cost. Many gardens I can show you in Assam, I know in Bengal. You will be surprised that, okay, if laborers quarters are of this kind of standards, so whether we should, how we can also do in our housing. Okay, so it is totally misconception, I think.
Thank you so much. I think we all have, I'm going to move on because this is I've got about 12 questions, 14 questions, most of which on this subject. I'm unable to read most of them. There's Srikumar Raghavan who has sent in a question. Thambi Nagarjuna has sent in many questions, including one saying that people who died in the recent, I think, floods, they were not able to bury them, and the workers were not able to bury them. But I'll move on. I think let's move on to other topics and other areas in this. Thank you so much both for your responses. Let me move on to other areas. Hold on, be with me. Let me move on to the question that one of the reasons why I think the labor is paid relatively low is because it's a very labor-intensive industry. If you reduce the labor, as you said, it accounts for 60% of the cost of production. 60% is labor cost. Now, if you reduce labor, then perhaps you can reduce cost or increase the wages that the labor gets. Now, why are we not mechanizing this industry much more? Why are we still following processes that are 150, 200, 250 years old? Why has there been no mechanization of tea plucking? Why is technology not used much more so that the labor intensity is reduced and people have a better life there? Very briefly, Mr. Sujit, and then I'll ask for Dharmaraj. The same question.
So far as North Indian tea is concerned, you see what happens. Mechanization we have also thought of, because in manual labor there is everything, all wages and everything comes under collective bargaining. Okay, usually it's two-partite, or sometimes it's tripartite also, bipartite or tripartite. Now there also productivity, how much a plucker will pluck, that is also negotiated, and we from the industry feels it is very low so far as we compare it to Kenya or Sri Lanka. It is very low. In so far as Assam is concerned, I am telling you, one plucker has to pluck 23 kgs of leaf, and beyond that they gave extra benefits, and if you give them extra benefits, they can go even cross 40 kgs per day. Okay, so because and you see what happens in any labor, there are that labor, his or her spouse, children all work. If we give them more as an extra benefit, they do not accept, because one employment is much more than that extra benefit. So always these unions, they force us to be that within that 23 kgs of leaf. So because of that, productivity.
Mr. Patra, my question was slightly different.
No, I'm coming.
My question was technology. Let me move on to Mr. Dharmaraj and ask him, why is technology, instead of increasing the production load, why not, Mr. Dharmaraj? Why not have more technology?
I'm finishing. We have also thought of mechanization. Already it has started in in Indian industry, but the quality, suffers. If we mechanize it, then all sorts of leaves will be plucked. But when it is hand plucked, the worker knows how to pluck, which to pluck. So all the productivity will increase, but quality will suffer. That's why, management, they judiciously think that, okay, so much mechanization or no mechanization or only manual plucking.
I'm moving into another difficult area. Mr. Dharmaraj, would you like to quickly respond to that? Why can't we have productivity? Why can't we have technology with quality? That's not impossible in this age, isn't it?
No, you're raising a very valid question, sir. I personally believe that this 65% cost dependency has to come down if this industry has to survive on a long-term basis. So there are two things you can do: either bring down that 65 to say about 35% by using lesser labor. There is a huge shortage of labor today in South India. I don't know about the North, but I was just, for the purpose of this presentation, I was checking the numbers with my erstwhile association friends, and I was given a figure of 40,000 workers in Kerala, and I had a shock. I was always carrying a figure of 3 to 4 lakhs workmen employed in this industry. So there's been a huge exodus of workers from this industry, and not exodus basically because the younger generation not wanting to go back to the plantations and do the same old manual job that they've been doing. So I think there is a shortage, and that shortage, to my mind, presents an opportunity for mechanization. Okay. Of course, it's not like industrial or engineering mechanization where you can take a piece of mechanization from a factory in Detroit and put it in a plant in Cochin. I mean, it's agricultural mechanization. There is issue of slopes, there is issue of the lie of the land. So there is a lot of research and development work has to be done, but nothing that is not doable. I think the industry must apply itself. Some progressive producers already working on it and are being successful at it.
There's also, Mr. Dharmaraj, been accusations that there's a lot of pesticide used in tea, and that the residue can be harmful. There was a question on that, I think, from one of our viewers.
There is a lot of misconception on the use of pesticides in tea. Yes, tea is a leaf crop, and it is subjected to attack by a lot of pests and diseases, so therefore warrants pesticide spraying. But believe me, there are a whole lot of systems in place in tea, unlike the vegetables and fruits that you eat every day. We are all governed by the plant protection code promulgated by the government of India. We are only allowed to buy pesticides cleared by the Central Board of Insecticides, Central Insecticides Board, and the FSSAI provides for pesticide residue in terms of parts per million. That's clearly laid on for each pesticide. It is laid on under the FSSAI, and mind you, it is all in terms of dry tea basis, and tea is never eaten. Tea is only diluted many times with water and heated and drunk. So even there is a safety net. But ultimately, these are all disciplines in the field operations. There is something called a field safe harvest interval for each pesticide. That means the number of days it takes between spraying and harvesting is stipulated for each chemical that is sprayed. So I believe there is a good discipline in this matter. There's a good system in place. So don't worry about tea being a pesticide hazard.
Thank you so much. I drink a lot of tea, so that is very confidence building to know. Thank you so much. Let me move on. Earlier you said, and Mr. Sujit said, there are 3 types of tea. There is the CTC, there's the orthodox tea, and there is a green tea. Now, the green tea has become a fad in the last 5-10 years. You go to an office and ask for tea, they give you green tea. They don't give you a regular cup of tea that cheers. How green is green tea? What are its health benefits? Is it likely to replace regular tea in the long run? And there was one question from, I think, somebody called, I couldn't quite, the question was something like this. There are information or rumors floating around that green tea can prevent COVID. How far has it been established that green tea can prevent COVID? First, and then I'll move to
good question. In fact, there are a lot of research work all over the world. Tea Board also has one arm which does this kind of research. Thousands of research papers have come out. Both green tea and black tea have the same benefits. Green tea has little more. Similarly, some properties of green tea, black tea has, which green tea does not have, vice versa. So green tea has become a fad, definitely. So far as COVID is concerned, there is research findings that tea, any tea, whether one consumes CTC, orthodox, green tea, whatever, tea provides immunity boosting. So whatever tea you drink, that gives boosting of immunity power of human being. And very recently, Ministry of Ayush also has come out with some in Twitter advertisement that I mean, people can drink tea, any tea, and it is a immunity booster. And nowadays, Indian Tea Association, Tea Board, all are doing this kind of promotion in the social media. All types of tea is good for health, and it prevents. It has a lot of antioxidants.
Very good. So there are health benefits of drinking tea.
Yeah.
So that is very good to know. Now, since we are running short of time, let me ask you a couple of quick questions. This is to Mr. Dharmaraj. Mr. Dharmaraj, what has been the impact of climate change on growing tea in Kerala? With the hills getting warmer, is there a likelihood that climate change will ultimately destroy tea plantations in the state?
Yes, climate change has definitely had a big impact on the production and the economics of the tea industry in Kerala. Rainfall. When I joined the plantation as a young assistant 45 years ago, the pre-monsoon showers used to come religiously on the 1st of March. The monsoons will start. You go to bed seeing a bright sky on 31st May, and then 1st June morning you will wake up listening to thunderous rain. So that kind of regularity is no longer happening. There are shorter spells of greater rainfall, which obviously affecting the crop production. The growers are losing control over their ability to predict crop production because of climate changes. And also, we normally follow a calendar of operation with respect to pest and disease management because it follows a certain weather pattern. That is no longer possible. That is why one is now looking at the use of drones to identify disease and pest patches and do a sort of localized spraying, etc. So, definitely it's affecting production, definitely it's affecting economics. I'm told Sajid will probably shed more light on it. Somebody had done a research and predicted that the tea growing areas of Assam will vanish in 50 years, given the trend in climate change.
That'll be terribly, terribly unfortunate, especially in Kerala, because Kerala, the tea gardens are also linked to tourism. A large part of our tourists come to go to the mountains, not to the beaches, as I said in the beginning. Has any studies been conducted, assessment made on how much is the percentage of tourist inflow that's related to the tea estate versus the total number of tourists coming into the state? How much of the total number of tourists coming into the state are there because of the mountains of the tea estates? Any such studies?
I don't know of any such statistics.
Can I come, sir?
But I don't
You're running
remember.
out of time. That is why I'm moving quickly. Yes.
No, sir. There is no such study.
Of some 10,000 tourists coming to Munnar in a day. I remember this figure because in my erstwhile company, we used to run a tourist business, and I used to pressurize the manager in charge and saying that when 10,000 people are coming, you are getting only 200 people out of that. So that number is stuck in my mind. But as a share of the total tourists into Kerala, I'm not sure, sir. What the number.
Can we promote tea tourism in the state?
Sir, can I come in?
You've got religious
yes
tourism.
no.
You've got other. There is no tea tourism. Can you promote that?
There is.
Joseph, can I
Yes
come in?
and no.
Yeah,
I think people are
Please.
already doing that. Many companies are using the tea factories, tea plantations, tea estate bungalows, etc., for the purpose of tourism. Having said that, there are some, I think, still some government regulations governing that.
Yes.
Because the government, although in principle have said in Kerala at least that 5% of your land is available for tourism and other activities. In practice, it is not happening because of local body resistance, local body permissions, etc.
That is the crux of the matter, sir.
Yeah.
Mr. Sujit, this question is to you. You see, the younger generation is into Coca-Cola, into Pepsi, Limca, Red Bull, and energy drinks. They don't drink tea very much. So how serious is this threat to the tea industry that youngsters are no longer drinking tea? When I drink tea, I feel like an old man, which of course I am. But the youngsters drink Pepsi and Limca. So is this going to affect the industry in the long run?
Absolutely. So this image is attached to the Indian tea industry. It's in tea, absolutely. But what happens? Indian Tea Association long time back perceived this. They made the traders, big traders, and we found that this kind of thing is happening. So what we did, we started road shows where we presented different variants of tea. In India, hot tea is very popular, but we also presented, you can believe, in this summer, we went to Delhi, we went to Rajasthan, Gujarat, everywhere, including South India, and we offered iced tea. And you can believe these students, we went to colleges where youngsters are there, and they queued for 10-15 minutes for a cup of tea. It was so popular. And thereafter, we have seen lot of tea parlors are also coming with lot of variants of tea, particularly hot tea and iced tea. So the situation is gradually changing. People, because of NGOs, thanks to NGOs, people have come to know the demerits of aerated soft drinks. And parallelly, as we go along, hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah,
We can hear you. But
as we go along, we can. They are finding it that tea has a lot of health benefits, antioxidants, a lot of other properties. So situation is slowly changing.
Joseph, can I?
Coffee. Oh yes, welcome, Dinka. Good to see you after such a long time. I don't think we have met for a very long time. You would like to respond to
Yes.
that question, Dinka? Dinka
Okay.
Srivastava is my batchmate from the Indian Foreign Service. He was our ambassador in Iran. He was our ambassador in Libya. He was our ambassador in the Czech Republic, and also I think first secretary or second secretary in our embassy in Amman.
Jeddah, yeah. Well, let me just mention some historical background. Tea Board used to run a very effective promotion campaign. And I remember my first posting in Cairo. Tea Board had a restaurant which was frequented by Naguib Mahfouz, who later won a Nobel Prize. So Indian Tea Board restaurant is actually mentioned in Naguib Mahfouz's novels. Second is that chai, which is the Indian word for tea, is there in Arabic. It is also the same word in Farsi. And you will be surprised to know chai is chai even in Bohemian Kingdom, in Czech Republic, and they have chai khanas. Now, what I want to stress is that with so much of background that we have and the effort put in by Tea Board and so on, we must move down into marketing. There is no Indian tea brand name. Whatever you see Ahmad's tea, which has established a Sri Lankan brand name. You see Earl Grey, which is a British brand name, basically marketing Indian tea, or Lipton and so on. So it requires a concerted attempt. Unfortunately, one Indian company, Tata Finlay, which made an attempt in this direction, I think they have now, that company has been wound up. So I think there is a need for this. And there is almost 300%, margin between the bulk prices and the retail prices. Between the bulk prices and the retail prices, 300% margin.
After your last.
My last point, and you see chai khanas in Prague with a menu giving 200 Chinese names, which are nothing but combinations of the same tea. Why can't we have an effort like that? And the last part, you go to any supermarket in the West and you'll find fusion tea. You'll find Germans marketing fusion tea, which actually has very little to do with the tea. So I think some generic promotion is required.
Dinka, that's exactly my point. We've got coffee at Starbucks. All youngsters go there. Tea doesn't have, the equivalent mountain bucks, or moonshine bucks or whatever. Tea doesn't have that. And Baskin Robbins, they have 34 types of ice creams. I don't know what the number is. Why can't we have that's a idea given to me by somebody this morning. Why can't we have the equivalent of Baskin Robbins for tea? Why is nobody thinking in those terms? Any response, Dinkar?
Can I?
I first give to Dinkar and then come to you, Sujit.
Yeah.
Dinkar
Yeah.
Srivastava?
No, well, I think that's an excellent suggestion. But actually, my concern is we are moving in the reverse direction with the tea bags, because there is no distinction left between the quality tea that India produces. For instance, Darjeeling, this is essentially powder. But you are right. I think we have to do more. I think Sujit will give you a professional's view.
Right. Sujit.
Sir, what happens to make and establish a brand? It needs time, it needs money. Now, in the Indian tea industry, last 6-7 years, there is no change in price. I mean, our tea mostly goes through auction. And if you see the official record, in the last 6-7 years, the same price we are getting. There is no change. Only this year, because of COVID and low production, there is little change. But in the last 6-7 years, there is no change. So that means plowing back capacity of the Indian tea people have reduced. Many of the tea gardens, tea companies are almost on the verge of closure. So in this situation, we always feel, we know that we need to establish brands. Sri Lanka has Dilma, but that is a private effort, and lot of government support they are getting. In India, there is tea board, but the financial support is not to the extent it is needed. They only give this for this 25%, for this 40%, like this, but it will not be sufficient to establish a brand particularly in the overseas markets. That is the dilemma for which we have not been able to progress on. But work has started already, and in the near future we will be doing so. In Iran, for which I must give credit to Sir Srivastava, they are in the last 2012-13, we used to export only 10-12 million kgs. Now we have crossed 55 million kgs, and all credit I must give to Srivastava sir. In 2013, we started going there, and he himself took us to all government ministerial department, in buyer seller limits everywhere. And today although there is no specific, there are few specific Indian brands, but almost in all Iranian brands, the major share is Indian tea.
Mr. Patra, I would like to continue, but Mohit Gupta, it reminds me that we have run short of time. I'll wind up by asking a final question to Mr. Dharmaraj. Mr. Dharmaraj, what do you see as the future of tea?
I believe that I mentioned that earlier on in the context, that the fact that this is 65% of his cost is on wages, and that will continue to rise on aspirational basis. As you yourself pointed out, sir, the living conditions of employees will come under greater public political scrutiny. So these costs are going to go up. So we need to find a way out of this. Either you need to bring this 65% down to 35% by appropriate mechanization, as you pointed out, or we need to look at a self-sustaining model, wherein I had suggested that, in fact, I've gone onto the public domain with that concept of decentralization of land ownership in favor of the workmen, because these lands have been exempt from the Land Ceiling Act for the purpose of growing plantations, and therefore they cannot be demonetized in any other manner. So these plantation companies will have to simply exist on the basis of operating margins. So what is a sustainable way forward for that kind of a thing is what we need to look at. We need to look at some very, very different out-of-the-box kind of thinking on this to have a sustainable, holistic way forward, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dharmaraj. You've really run short of time. I would have loved to cover more topics as well. Dinkar, any last words?
Yes. The British are the great tea drinkers. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is going to be the chief guest for 26th January. there should be a tea promotion organized. Present him some good teas, as I used to make the point that best quality tea for the Queen of England and Emperor of Japan is from India. So I hope we will make use of this. And your point about tea tourism, I've been to the tea plantation in Kerala. It's something out of the way, but people don't know. In France, you have, and US, you have tours to vineyards. Why not, to tea plantations? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sudhinkar Srivastava. Thank you, Mr. Narendranath Dharmaraj. And thank you, Sujit Patra. My apologies. I have got about 25 questions, most of which, some of them I have picked up, and without mentioning the names, I have asked as my questions. My apologies that I could not pick up and pose those questions to the panel here, but it's been wonderful. I wish we had more time on this, but Mohit Gupta has been sending me threatening messages saying we got to stop now. So thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking. May I hand over the floor to Mohit and say cheers before we sign off.
I've got my own cup now, sir. I have got the green tea now. I've brewed it for more than 3 minutes now, so I can actually enjoy it. And cheers to everyone and to the great teas of India, which should remain the best habit for all of us. Thank you very much for all of you for tuning in, and thank you very much for this eminent erudite panel for bringing us so much enlightenment about the teas. We'll wake up as healthy as possible from tomorrow onwards after having our green teas. Thank you very much.
Once again, thanks everybody, and thank you, Mr. Dharmaraj. Thank you, Mr. Sujit, and thanks especially to my batchmate, Mr. Dinkar Srivastava, for all your valuable inputs. Thanks again, Mohit. Goodbye, namaskar.
Thank you.
And a happy new year to everybody.
Same to you.
Thank you.